Thank you so much to all the advocates that I see online that care deeply about protecting our community. I don't want to say too much other than please remember that no matter your neighbor's immigration status, no matter your immigration status, you still have rights. And this is the way we can protect our community. Again, it doesn't matter who's been elected or who's, in power. What matters is how we take care of our community here at home. So I really appreciate it. I do want Tony to go over again for those that are on Facebook right now live. If you need Arabic translation or Spanish translation, we're going to put a QR code up. You can log in by using, just put your phone up. You can log in, or I think we might be able to put a link so that you can click on and get onto the to this side of the webinar so that you can have translation again. I'm hoping maybe Elizabeth, if you can say that in Spanish real quick, that would be really helpful.
Hello. Si ustedes no tienen acceso al enlace de Zoom, usted puede presionar el código QR que hay en la página para que pueda entrar para el enlace de Zoom y pueda escucharlo en el idioma preferible.
If the Arabic translator can do the same, please.
مرحبا. طبعا بالنسبة للحاضرين معنا الذين حابين يعني بالترجمة باللغة العربية ممكن ينضموا إلينا وراح تكون هناك ترجمة باللغة العربية.
Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Tony. Thank you again for being on here.
Representative. Now we'll pass it off to Ruby Robinson, Managing Attorney from Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. Go ahead, Ruby.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen.
Voy a compartir mi pantalla.
Second, let's make sure that everyone can see it.
Solo para que todo el mundo pueda verlo.
Okay, so my name is Ruby Robinson. I'm an attorney with the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center.
اسمي روبي روبنسون هو من مركز ميشيغان للحقوق.
I hope that everyone can hear the interpretation in the right channel because I hear both interpretation at the same time, but hopefully you're in the right channel and you can hear what you need to hear.
Espero que todos puedan escuchar. Espero que todos puedan escuchar los intérpretes en los lugares apropiados. Yo puedo escucharlos los dos al mismo tiempo.
Okay, Robbie, you can go ahead.
I can keep going.
Yeah, so I think I'm so sorry for the technical difficulty. Folks are trying to put the link in for the Spanish and Arabic translation right now to get on this side of the wall to be able to access translation. But I think the translators need to be muted and into another, because we can hear them, Tony.
Right.
I'm working on it now.
Okay. I'm so sorry, Ruby, but it's going to have to continue this way.
No,
okay.
It's fine. You know, we'll do a little bit of this at the beginning and hopefully,
yes.
It'll.
Yeah, until we can get it situated. I apologize.
No, okay. It's fine. So at the outset, I just want everyone to know that there are no magic words that prevent immigration enforcement. If I had them, I would be sharing them with you.
Solo les quiero dejar saber que no hay ninguna palabra mágica para prevenir la policía. Si lo tuviera, se lo daría, pero no lo hay.
But fortunately, we do have laws, we do have a constitution, and so knowing your rights and being prepared is the best thing that you can do at this time.
Pero afortunadamente hay derechos y hay leyes y sabiendo sus derechos pueden asegurar que ustedes estén preparados.
طبعا مهم جدا لدينا يعني قوانين والقوانين هي طبعا لحماية المجتمع.
Just a little bit about our program, the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. We provide free legal services and advocacy across the state for Michigan's non-citizens.
طبعا بالنسبة لبرامجنا احنا لدينا يعني بنقدم الخدمات القانونية.
Solo un poco sobre MERC. Nosotros somos un centro estatal de recursos jurídicos para la comunidad de inmigrantes en Michigan.
And here's an example of some of the services and the areas where we provide representation.
Y esto es un ejemplo de las diferentes áreas de donde ofrecemos ayuda y representación.
طبعا من ضمن هذه الخدمات اللي بنقدمها هي خدمات يعني الهجرة، وكمان بالنسبة لخدمات التوظيف. طبعا هذه الأشياء اللي هنا مذكورة اللي هي بالنسبة للتجنس أو بالنسبة للإغاثة بالنسبة للناجي من عنف الأسري وضحايا الجرائم.
We will do our best to respond to your phone calls. I will just ask for your patience. Right now, we are getting 4 times our usual call volume, and it's taking over a week to respond just due to the demand.
طبعا سنحاول يعني قدر المستطاع ان احنا الاجابات على اسئلتكم. حاليا طبعا في الكثير من المكالمات وبنحتاج الى حدود الاسبوع للرد على مكالماتكم.
Le pedimos que tengan un poco de paciencia a lo que le devolvemos la llamada. Ahora mismo estamos teniendo estamos teniendo llamadas 4 veces más de lo normal, entonces no está tomando más tiempo para que podamos devolverla.
And if we're unable to take your case, it's not because we don't want to help you. It just probably means we don't have the resources and capacity at a given time.
طبعا احنا اذا لم ناخذ يعني قضيتكم معنى هذا انه مش ان احنا مش حابين ان ناخذ القضيه، ولكن لا توجد لدينا اي من الموارد لاخذ هذه القضيه.
Y si no le podemos tomar el caso es porque desafortunadamente no tenemos los recursos o la ayuda para que lo podamos obtener el caso.
So just a note here, there will be opportunities at the end to ask questions. We will not be providing legal advice. We will be providing information.
طبعا في نهاية المحاضرة راح يكون إذا يعني ممكن تطرحوا بعض الأسئلة. طبعا هذه المحاضرة هي محاضرة فقط يعني معلوماتية وليس محاضرة لإعطاء النصح.
No vamos a dar recomendaciones o consejos legales, solo vamos a dar información básica.
So the agenda, we're going to talk about before, during, and after an enforcement action.
طبعا بالنسبة لجدول اليوم راح يكون قبل الحدث أو قبل يعني ما حد مثلا يعني يتكلم معك أو وخلال الحدث وبعد الحدث.
Esta será la agenda para hoy. Vamos a hablar sobre el antes, el durante y el después de una acción de ejecución.
We have materials on our website, michiganimmigrant.org. We'll also put the link in the chat. It's called our Family Preparedness Guide, and it's available in multiple languages.
طبعا في الكثير من المعلومات في الويب سايت تبعنا، وهو يعني المعلومات اللي متواجدة هي لتحضير العوائل بالنسبة لقضايا الهجرة.
Tenemos recursos en nuestra página y la página la voy a poner en la área del chat y este recurso se llama Cómo preparar a su familia.
Well, I will try to put it in there. I think it'll go to everybody. But michiganimmigrant.org, and the materials are in English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Bangla, Dari, Pashto, and Kinyarwanda.
طبعا بالنسبة للموقع هو immigration.org، وفي كثير من المصادر والموارد بعدة لغات مختلفة.
Voy a tratar de poner el enlace en el chat, pero tenemos los documentos en español, inglés, árabe,
French, Pashto,
francés,
Dari,
Pashto y Dari.
and Bangla and Kinyarwanda. Thank you. So every person, regardless of immigration status, has rights in relation to interactions with the government generally, and certainly in the context of immigration enforcement.
طبعا كل شخص لديه حقوق، سواء كان يعني بالنسبة للتكلم مع بالنسبة للقضايا يعني الهجرة، ويعني عندك أنت يعني الحقوق، وحتى لو كان ما عندكش أي أوراق.
Sí tienes derecho, aunque no seas ciudadano, aunque no tengas estatus legal, aunque no tengas papeles, y enfrente de los oficiales y los agentes.
So before anything happens, preparedness is key.
قبل أي شيء يحدث يعني التحضير يعني هو مفتاح أي قضية.
De que pase algo, lo más importante es estar preparados.
Make a plan with you and your family members about what happens if somebody were to be picked up.
لازم من وضع خطة يعني مع أي حد من العائلة عشان لو حدث أي شيء.
Tengan un plan sobre qué pasará si usted o un familiar va a ser recogido con los agentes de inmigración.
Make copies of important documents, keep them safe, and share them with a trusted person.
أعمل نسخ من الوثائق وأشاركها مع أي حد يعني قريب بالنسبة لك.
Hagan copias de sus documentos de inmigración y dele una copia a alguien a quien usted confía.
If possible, have a consultation with an attorney who practices immigration law to understand what relief, if any, you are eligible for now or in the event of an enforcement action.
طبعا لازم يعني لك الحق انك يعني تتواصل يعني مع محامي خاص يعني بالنسبة لقضيتك.
Si es posible, haga una consulta con un abogado de inmigración y averigüe si puede obtener ayuda de inmigración.
Again, focus on your children and vulnerable family members.
طبعا مرة أخرى لازم تركز على عائلتك.
Y otra vez, enfóquese en sus familias, preparen a sus hijos.
Who will pick up your children from school? Are they listed on the emergency contact card? Have they been added to the school safe release plan?
يعني من اللي راح ياخذهم في حالة إنه حصل أي شيء، من اللي راح ياخذهم من المدرسة. لازم تكون يعني عندك خطة من الأشخاص اللي تثق فيهم، اللي راح يستلمهم من المدرسة أو يتواصل معاهم. فضروري تكون عندك خطة مسبقة في حالة حصل أي شيء.
Tengan un plan sobre quién va a recoger a sus hijos y tengan un plan de quién puede estar con sus hijos si están detenidos.
You may want to also consider preparing a delegation of parental authority for someone to care for your children if you are unable to do so.
حتى بالإمكانية إنك تعمل يعني ورقة بحيث إنك تخول يعني شخص معين في حالة إنه حصل يعني شيء ما، على الأقل إنه في شخص معين اللي راح يتولى بالنسبة لأفراد عائلتك.
Y consideren preparar una delegación a poder partenal para que puedan tener a alguien por si usted está detenido.
This is available in our preparedness guide as a fill-in-the-blank document. It's also available on the michiganlegalhelp.org website in English and Spanish too.
طبعا هذه الوثيقة يعني هي متواجدة في الموقع، وبإمكانكم أنكم تنزلوا هذه الورقة والوثيقة هذه وتحضروها في حالة أنه حصل أي شيء، أتليس أنه أولادك أو عائلتك يكونوا في أمان، يعني مع الشخص اللي أنت تعينه يكون وكيل عليهم.
Está disponible en nuestra página y lo puede llenar cuando lo obtenga y también está disponible en la página de la ayuda de Michigan Legal.
ayudalegaldeMichigan.org. It is valid for 6 months and it does not need to be notarized.
وهي يعني سارية المفعول لمدة 6 أشهر ولا تحتاج إلى توثيق.
Está válido por 6 meses y no es un documento que tiene que ser notarizado.
It can be ready to be signed when the moment allows for it or requires it.
وهي بتحتاج إلى توقيع إذا في حالة إنه في حالة الاحتياج.
Puede estar listo para firmar cuando lo tenga que usar o cuando el momento llegue que lo tenga que usar.
To the extent that your children need passports or don't have them, please try to obtain them and also register your children with the consulate.
كمان في حالة إنه أطفالك بحاجة إلى جوازات ضروري عملهم يعني جوازات وتتواصل يعني مع القنصلية.
Si su hijo puede obtener un pasaporte o no tiene uno, considere obtener uno y también registrar a su hijo con las oficinas del consulado.
This may seem obvious, but one of the most common and unfortunate ways that people end up in removal proceedings is by driving onto the toll plaza of the Ambassador Bridge or the Blue Water Bridge.
طبعا الكثير من الأحداث دائما ما تحصل عندما يعبر الناس جسر السفير، فكثير ما يحتجزوا الأشخاص اللي بيعبروا هذا الجسر، فضروري الحذر من العبور عن طريق الجسر.
Una forma que las personas son detenidos es si se acercan al puente de Ambassador y el puente del Blue Water, así que aléjense del puente.
If you do end up there by mistake, request a turnaround pass. Those are magic words. Turnaround pass at the toll. And hopefully you will be able to be escorted out of the toll plaza without having an encounter with Customs and Border Protection officer.
إذا حصل إنك يعني غلط أو إذا
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Si acaba allí en el puente, solicite un pase de vuelta en el peaje.
So even though there are very large signs with American flags and Canadian flags that Representative Tlaib helped put in place when she was in state government, people still end up there by mistake all the time.
Aunque hay muchas banderas y muchas señales que está llegando el puente, muchas personas terminan estando ahí.
Go to trusted legal professionals for legal services. Notaries are not attorneys, and they're not permitted to practice law in Michigan.
Vaya para una persona a la cual usted confíe. Los notarios no son abogados y eviten abogados que no confían.
Ask nonprofits or trusted legal service providers for recommendations if you are looking for counsel.
Pídale proveedores de servicios legales sin ánimo de lucro por referencias que confían.
As of January 20th, the Department of Homeland Security has updated its approach to sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, houses of worship, in the context of immigration enforcement.
And my apologies, Ruby, just to let you know, now it is back working. So I'm going to start over at least with providing everybody the information when it comes to interpreters.
Yeah,
So we will
go
no
ahead.
longer be able to hear our translations. We'll have to go to the bottom of the screen. At the right, you'll see a globe icon and select the language you would like. We do apologize for technical issues and we thank you for your patience with us thus far.
Yeah.
But at this time, you will have to select the interpretation you would like.
So Elizabeth, can you give those instructions in Spanish, and if our Arabic translator can do the same, please?
Yes,
So that
and then
folks
we'll
know.
do it simultaneously. So now
Yep.
Ruby can continue to do
Yep.
this as normal.
Got it. Elizabeth, if you want to start.
I think she might be in the chat.
We can't hear her. So Ruby, can you do it in Spanish?
Sí, oh, Elizabeth, trying.
There you go, because you were unmuted. I apologize. Go ahead.
Still think it's not working. So si necesita seguir en español, hay un enlace por abajo con un globo por interpretación. Usted se puede marcar español o árabe para seguir en este idioma. All right, well, we'll continue and hopefully folks will get that. I don't know if there's a way to put that in the chat to everybody else. Oh, simultaneous channels are working. Great. Okay, perfect. So I will continue at a more regular pace. So the sensitive locations policy has changed in regard to immigration enforcement. That also means courthouses too can be places for immigration enforcement. ICE is supposed to use common sense when conducting enforcement at or near these locations. We know that this changes a lot about your daily life and the lives of your family members in terms of the risks you are taking. And we think it's helpful to think about your day-to-day life and interactions in terms of risk tolerance when making a decision about getting healthcare for your child or doing something else. For example, not taking your child to the doctor because they're sick, may avoid having immigration enforcement, in interaction with immigration enforcement, but it will lead to other problems. Like a medical professional accusing you of negligence in terms of the care of your child if your child should have received care sooner. And that will be really bad for you and your family, not to mention your sick child. So thinking through your day-to-day life and decisions as a matter of what's risky versus less risky, I think is a helpful paradigm or framework as we move forward. One of the safest places that you can be during or at the time of an enforcement action is inside of a private dwelling. Law enforcement is only permitted to enter private spaces under two conditions. One is they have consent to enter that place, or two, they have a judicial warrant to allow them into that space. If law enforcement enters without a warrant and without your permission, do not resist them. If it seems like you're going to be detained, inform the officer or agent about critical items that you need or to take care of. Like ensuring someone is able to pick up your children, that you know what medication you need, etc. So it can be difficult to determine, if law enforcement has a warrant or not. I will just say that ICE is focused on civil immigration enforcement, and it is rare that they have criminal warrants to enter spaces. But a criminal warrant issued by a court usually has at least two things on it. It has the court's name and it has the judge's signature. If it does not have both of those things, it is probably not a judicial warrant. ICE uses administrative warrants in which their officers sign. If it does not have a court name on it and does not have a judge's name, it's probably not a warrant. A car is also a protected space, not to the same extent as a home, but there are rights that exist while you are in a vehicle. If you are not comfortable communicating in English in any setting with law enforcement, your house, a car, or anywhere, you have the right to ask for interpretation. And law enforcement is required to provide it. Do not lie to law enforcement. And if asked, you are permitted to say no when law enforcement wants to search your vehicle. Law enforcement may only search a vehicle if they have probable cause to believe that something illegal is occurring, has occurred, or will occur. In every interaction with law enforcement, everyone, regardless of immigration status, has the right to remain silent. If law enforcement is requesting information about immigration status, and you have those, show them to the officer. On the street, if there's an interaction with law enforcement, ask if you're being detained or if you have the right to leave. If so, do so calmly. In a workplace, again, an officer has permission to enter and be in a public area, but not in a private area. So the public part of a restaurant is public, where customers sit. The kitchen or other places are private and either need consent from the business owner or manager or a warrant to enter those spaces. In all of these settings, your home, your car, at work, do not show false documents or lie to law enforcement. Recently, there has been a change to something known as expedited removal, which is the authority for the Department of Homeland Security to issue a deportation order without a hearing before an immigration judge. This authority has been expanded in the United States to every part of the United States for persons who have been present for less than 2 years. The ICE officer or Border Patrol officer can just summarily issue a deportation order, and there is no hearing or review of that order. If you fear returning to your home country, you have to affirmatively tell the officer, I fear returning to my home country, and that you want a credible fear interview. So to avoid expedited removal orders, it's a good idea to carry evidence that you have lived in the United States for more than 2 years, if that's true. If you are in process, some type of immigration process, keep evidence of that on you. That can also demonstrate how long you've been in the United States. It's possible that you still might be detained temporarily during expedited removal. But if you pass the credible fear interview, you will enter regular removal proceedings, which will take a lot longer. And potentially you could be released. You can always ask to speak with an attorney. You have the right to counsel, but the government is not going to provide you counsel. If you have been arrested or are arrested, again, you have the right to remain silent, and that applies to all persons regardless of immigration status. In the back of our preparedness guides, there are little cards that you can print out and show the officer that says, I wish and choose to remain silent. It also has a place to write the name of attorney or organization and their phone number, so you don't have to look through your phone for this. If you are being detained, make sure that the officer has your full legal name so that family members, friends, or attorneys can find you in detention. When arrested, you have the right to ask and know why you're being arrested and who is arresting you. Some people say don't sign anything. I disagree with that advice and information. My recommendation is don't sign anything you don't understand. If it's in a language you don't understand, ask for it to be translated or ask for an interpreter. You have that right. Sometimes an officer may ask you to sign a piece of paper and tell you it is one thing when it's actually not. Again, understand what you are signing if you're going to sign something. If you want to see a judge, if you want bond, tell the officer that. They might say it's going to take more time. It's your right to see a judge if you want to see a judge. You also have the right to contact your embassy or consulate if it's safe to do so. You can ask for bond. Usually that is set by an immigration judge, but ICE does have the authority to set bond. It usually declines. Again, if you are scared to return to your home country, tell the officer as much. And if you are looking for a family member who's been detained, there are some links on this slide right here for you to visit. You can also call ICE in Detroit to look for them. According to federal law, it is unlawful to detain someone for longer than 48 hours after they are otherwise permitted to leave. What this means, for example, is if somebody is detained for a state or local offense, and they're permitted to be released, that jurisdiction can hold that person for 48 hours if they receive a detainer, a request from ICE to hold them. "48 hours does not include weekends or holidays. If the individual is still detained after 48 hours, demand, to be released, or contact an attorney or an organization to demand for your release. Because that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Non-citizens arrested for, charged with, or convicted of crimes can suffer consequences in the immigration space. It is more important now than ever to understand what these consequences are and to ensure that your criminal defense attorney does too. Last week, a law was passed that will change who is eligible to be released on bond and who is ineligible. So don't commit any crimes. And if you are charged or arrested for a crime, speak to an attorney who understands these consequences immediately. Earlier, we talked about making a plan if you are picked up and for loved ones to be cared for in your absence. Make sure that the person you trust who is caring for your family members has reliable transportation, has car seats, has a working cell phone so you can reach them. In Appendix B of our preparedness guide, there is a long form that you can fill out with all the critical information that that person needs, like doctors, medication, schools, employers, financial information so that they can care for the family members in your absence. Just a quick recap. Everyone has rights in every interaction with law enforcement. We don't always talk about the right for language access, but you have it, and absolutely demand that if you do not understand what the officer is saying, that they provide an interpreter or that the document that's given to you is translated into a language you understand. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier. Don't sign anything that you do not understand. If you see police or law enforcement misconduct, you are permitted to videotape that and you can send it here. Or you can call the ACLU of Michigan about that. And here's our contact information as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Ramis at the ACLU and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ruby, for that presentation. We'll now hear from Ramis Wadud, staff attorney for the ACLU of Michigan.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Ruby, for that wonderful presentation. My name is Ramis Wadud. I'm an attorney at the ACLU of Michigan. I focus on immigrants' rights here at the ACLU. I have a presentation that I want to share. Now, Ruby covered a lot of information, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of important rights that Ruby mentioned, just as a reminder, and then I'm going to share some additional information. So again, as a reminder, when you are at home, you have the right to keep your door closed. If immigration comes knocking on your door, you don't have to open the door. Instead, you should ask for a warrant and make sure that that warrant is signed by a judge. You can look at the top of the
Slow down.
document.
I'm so sorry, Ramis.
Oh, no
I'm
problem.
checking to make sure translation. Yep, just some time for them to do it. I know you can't see one of our translators, but just
Okay,
want to give them a
awesome.
little bit more time.
Yeah, of course. So look for a judge's signature on that warrant. You can ask them to slip it under your door or show you through the window. And like Ruby mentioned, oftentimes immigration is not going to have a warrant from a judge. Now, when you're outside of your home, on the street, or in your car, you have the right to remain silent, regardless of your immigration status or any other status. All you have to do is tell that officer, I wish to remain silent, and speak to a lawyer. If they stop you on the street, ask them if you're being detained. And if they tell you no, then politely walk away and continue with your day. If they want to search you, you can refuse to consent to that search. But if they have a warrant, or if they have probable cause to search you, you should comply with that search. So once again, if you're at home, you don't have to open your door if ICE is knocking unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. And if you're in your car or walking down the street, you have the right to remain silent if they ask you questions. Now, I wanted to share a bit more additional information for other situations. You also have the right to film immigration agents or police officers. You can do so as long as you're outside in a public place. Just make sure you stand back and not interfere with any arrest or interrogation. If they ask you to move back, comply with the request and keep recording if you feel comfortable. You also have a right to protest, whether you're protesting ICE's actions or anything else. As long as you're doing so in public areas like streets, sidewalks, and outside of government buildings. But you should be careful to stay within the bounds of the protest. And you should comply with any police orders to move. Overall, if you attend a protest, please do whatever you need to do to stay safe. I also wanted to point out some differences in the officers you might be seeing on the streets. In Michigan, because we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, you're going to be seeing ICE and the Border Patrol on our streets. And even though the Border Patrol is supposed to be at the border, you could see them anywhere in the state. That's because the Border Patrol claims that the entire state of Michigan is a border. Now, ICE, which you've most likely heard of, are responsible for going into our communities and arresting people that they think are here without authorization. They might be in plain clothes. They might be wearing a vest or a jacket that says police on it. Now, Border Patrol, often they wear green uniforms, so they might look different. And of course, you may also see local police officers, and their uniforms depend on what city they're from. These differences matter because the Border Patrol has some additional authority to board and search cars, buses, trains. The Border Patrol also has a really big problem with racial discrimination in the people they stop. The good thing is that regardless of who stops you, you have the same rights that I mentioned before. Just to highlight some of the danger of racial discrimination from the Border Patrol. Based on documents that we reviewed, the Border Patrol seems to racially profile 96% of the people that they approach. As of a few years ago, 1/3 of the people they stopped were actually US citizens. And again, you can find Border Patrol anywhere in the state, but especially in cities close to our border with Canada. If you are close to the Canadian border, Detroit, Dearborn, Hamtramck, the Border Patrol can enter private property like restaurants and stores in order to search for people. But they still need a warrant to enter your home. Now, anywhere in the state of Michigan, Border Patrol can set up checkpoints. And if you pass through that checkpoint, Border Patrol can ask questions about your immigration status. These are not very common in Michigan, but if you do encounter Border Patrol, again, you do not have to consent to a search. But like Ruby said at the beginning of his presentation, unfortunately, there are no magic words to prevent ICE or Border Patrol from arresting you or your loved ones. Unfortunately, even though everyone has rights, people's rights are violated all the time. So in addition to knowing your rights, do everything you need to do to stay safe at home and in your communities. And if you've been harassed by the police or immigration, or if you feel like your rights have been violated, you should call the ACLU at our hotline, 313-208-7048. If you call that hotline, it goes straight to my voicemail box. And we will try our best to respond to you as soon as we can. There are more materials on our website, or you could reach out to me at the email address on the screen.
Thank you, Ramesh. I think we're gonna go ahead, go ahead and turn it to Derek Lee to be able to facilitate some of the questions. I already see one. I answered some of them live.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and thank you, Ramis and Ruby, for joining us as our panelists, and to our
Slow down
translators.
for the translators, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Just so you know, we have recorded this webinar, and we will be posting this to our YouTube page and to our Facebook page after we conclude. And a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. Our first question here is, if you need to show documents, do they have to be the originals? Can a person carry copies?
So for identification purposes, if you have an original document, carry that one. Other documents, for example, showing that you've lived in the United States for more than 2 years, that can be a photocopy. Or a photocopy of some document showing that you have a pending immigration-related application. And my recommendation is to keep them on you and not as a picture on your phone. We don't necessarily want you handing your phone over to law enforcement, because then they can search it for other things.
Our next question here is, if I'm a US citizen, but ICE comes to my workplace to ask questions and look for coworkers, what are my rights and how can I protect my colleagues?
Your rights in interactions with law enforcement apply regardless of your immigration status or the location where you have this interaction. You have the right to remain silent. You are not required to answer that information from law enforcement. Now, if you are an employer or the owner of a business, you have different responsibilities, and I'm not going to go into those right now, but you should seek specific counsel about what you are required and not required to share or disclose. I will also add that in lots of settings, there are additional privacy rules and laws that prevent information from being shared or disclosed. For example, if you work in healthcare, you cannot share information that identifies particular patients. And that applies in the context of law enforcement asking for that information. If they need that information, they can come back with a warrant. Public schools as well have protections about student privacy and are not required to share this information with law enforcement either.
Thanks, Ruby. Our next question is, should US citizens who are non-fluent or perhaps people of color be carrying documents right now to prove their citizenship, including children?
There is no requirement that US citizens carry evidence that they are citizens. However, if you suspect that you are going to be profiled, unfortunately, it may be beneficial to carry that type of evidence with you to avoid something unpleasant becoming even worse.
I would also reach out to ACLU, Michigan, because they do work on racial profiling cases. While Derek gets the next question, Ruby, there's one in Spanish in the Q&A if you want to grab that one. And then Derek's going to grab the next one. The one right above.
I believe it might be the same one because it's from the same person.
Okay.
In English, it is, my question is, how can I help a family detained by Border Patrol? They are from Venezuela and had a work permit. Can they apply for asylum if they are already detained?
So I'm not providing legal advice, I'm providing information here. But I will try to answer this question with the information based on what I know. We are going to see, and will continue to see, people with work permits or people in process of fixing their immigration status being picked up. It has already happened. It's always happened, but we will see it more often. Depending on the immigration posture of their case and what they were pursuing, they may be able to continue that from detention or in removal proceedings if they're released. So it is totally viable for a lot of people to pursue relief like asylum if they are picked up and placed in detention. Without going into too much detail, I will also say that people who entered the United States using the CBP-1 app or who were paroled in through one of the parole programs, if they are detained, they are ineligible for bond. And so, again, there's no magic words to prevent detention or to prevent an enforcement action from occurring. But if someone was paroled in through one of the parole programs or used CBP-1 to make an appointment and they are subsequently detained, they are ineligible for bond. I will also make a plug that people who are in detention in Michigan may call our office for free from detention. There should be instructions posted in each of the detention centers about how to do so. We may not be able to take your case for full representation, but hopefully at a minimum, we can provide you brief advice and information over the phone so you can make the right decisions moving forward.
Really quick, I also would say if there's any situation, you can also contact your member of Congress. If I am your member, we'll make sure to put the information out. Tony Dunbar is our district director, and we will process that. And sometimes we will lean on both the organizations presenting today, but we also can handle specific cases that do not require legal advice and or check on statuses and things of that nature.
Thank you both. Our next question is about the current status of the challenge to birthright citizenship.
So
Can you grab that one?
yeah, the challenge to birthright citizenship has been paused pursuant to litigation. We expect that litigation to resolve, any future attempts this administration has to create second-class citizenship in the United States. But it has to go through a court process. And fortunately, right now, the bedrock settled principle of constitutional law, persons born in the United States are and continue to be U.S. citizens under the 14th Amendment.
I do have a question. Do you, does Michigan Immigrant Rights Center have a Know Your Rights presentation in Spanish that is available?
We have, all of our materials are available in all the languages. The preparedness guide is available in Spanish as well. I don't know if we have an updated recorded presentation, but
Okay.
Our website and our materials are changing every day. And so we are adding as quickly as possible, as many materials and resources there. So again, michiganimmigrant.org, also our Facebook page, as updates every day about immigration law as it affects Michiganders too.
Our next question is, if immigration officers come to my home, who is going to sign the warrant? And how do I know that the warrant is real?
So again, with a judicial warrant has to have two main components, among others, right? It has to have the court's name and it has to have the judge's signature on it. Without both of them, it is not a judicial warrant. People can ask for the warrant to be slipped under the door, to be pressed against a window, to be shown to the video doorbell system, or maybe the agent or officer can text it or email it to the individual. But unless you are comfortable reading and understanding the language on the document in English, you may not know. But on the screen, there are some samples of what a warrant looks like and what it doesn't look like, right? One document says court, and the other one says Department of Homeland Security. If it's a court, it's probably a warrant. If it doesn't, it's probably not. A warrant that permits ICE permission to enter that space. Again, remember, ICE is in charge of civil immigration enforcement. It is rare that they would have a criminal warrant to arrest someone or to search a space.
I want to give some time for the translators.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. We're learning a lot today. I think we're going to do a thumbs up when they're ready. Any other questions, Derek?
One more here is, if I am here on temporary protected status, am I now at risk of deportation?
And for everyone listening, you'll hear people call it TPS. It's one of the acronyms that actually people recognize as the acronym more than what it actually stands for, but it's TPS, temporary protected status.
So temporary protected status is that it is temporary. It is within the discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security to extend TPS or not. There are a number of countries for which TPS is active. Recently, the Secretary decided to vacate an extension of TPS for certain Venezuelans and to terminate TPS altogether for that same batch of Venezuelans. such that TPS would expire in early April of 2025. I assume that question is as it relates to Venezuelans. But again, TPS is temporary. It can be a very long-term temporary for some people, but it is temporary. And if it ends, and if a person does not have another form of relief pending, they revert back to whatever status they had before TPS.
Thank you both so much and for your time this evening. We have time for one more question. It's a clarification question about the difference between Border Patrol and ICE. Can you please explain that to us?
Sure, and I hope you can hear me. I had to switch devices. So I think that what you should walk away from this presentation with is that you have rights regardless of who tries to arrest you or pull you over.
Well, one of the things, just to clarify, so the question was, is ICE always looking for a specific person? I can tell you by my own experience, they will say that's what they're doing and that they have a warrant. But in 90% of the time that I've encountered growing up and living in Southwest Detroit for so long is, and I know between, the unmarked cars, what some of the things that I look out for is sometimes they are also randomly patrolling, just like Border Patrol does, and not taking on what some would call like an operation or looking for someone specific. They say that, but we have encountered over and over again. And I know ACLU has done a 10-year study showing that that is not the case. So I think Ramis is right, no matter if it's ICE or Border Patrol. And in our communities, we call them the blue uniforms or the green uniforms, or the ones that come in all the black cars, unmarked vehicles. But all of them are under Homeland Security. And I believe in many ways that the rights that you heard tonight apply to all. I think that's it. So thank you all so much. I saw, a public school teacher online. I saw a person that runs a program through their local church. I saw neighbors who were very concerned about their loved ones. A number of folks that we can see behind, our screens asking really important questions. Thank you so much for caring about protecting your family members. Thank you to our interpreters. I know it was very, very difficult. We thank you so much. We thank Ruby and Ramis. Both organizations are incredibly important to our communities. They provide, free legal advocacy and services, and continue again to provide that support for some of our most vulnerable, and we appreciate